Hey everyone, Tech Haberdashery here. So I guess I'm not really doing a review. This is just kind of my thoughts on with the recent issue with EA closing down Visceral Games. One article I read somewhere across Facebook late Friday night, it's now Sunday morning, that I cannot find again, asked the question if the future of single player games is doomed. With a company like EA pushing for the games as a service model, what's the future going to be? Is it only going to be multiplayer experiences with halfway single player, or is somebody going to pick up the torch for single player games? And I guess it kind of, I can't remember who wrote it now because I was going to sleep. I was reading it on my iPad while I was in bed, so I apologize for that, and I can't re-find it. At any rate, I kind of wrote down some ideas here. I'm going to be half reading, half talking during this, and I'm going to put up just some gameplay footage of a couple single-player games that I really enjoy, so, you have something other to do than look at my face. This is going to be mostly just commentary. So with EA shutting down Visceral Games, Visceral Games was the developers of what was going to be a new Star Wars action-adventure game, which is teased in E3 of 2016. The question has come up if the future of single-player games is in trouble, or if perhaps I think a better question may be, what do they look like in the future? So far as I can tell, this started with a Forbes article published on October 18th, 2017, written by a Mr. Eric Kane. Mr. Kane posits the idea, quote, "Unfortunately, it looks like EA's vision for that game differed substantially from the people who were actually making the game," end quote. He also quotes a comment from EA's executive vice president, Patrick Soderlund, in his blog regarding the closure of the Visceral Games studio and what the future of the game would be. Mr. Patrick Soderlund's quote is, "In its current form, it was shaping up to be a story-based linear adventure game. Throughout the development process, we have been testing the game concept with players, listening to feedback about what and how they want to play, and closely tracking the fundamental shifts in the marketplace. It has become clear that to deliver an experience that players will want to come back to and enjoy for a long time to come, we need to pivot the design. We will maintain the stunning visuals, authenticity of the Star Wars universe, and focus on bringing a Star Wars story to life. Importantly, we are shifting the game to be a broader experience that allows for more variety and player agency, leaning into the capabilities of our Frostbite engine and reimagining central elements of the game to give players a Star Wars adventure of greater depth and breadth to explore," end quote. After that comment, Mr. Kane states that, quote, "EA wanted to fit the games as a service mold, and a linear action-adventure in the vein of Uncharted just won't cut it," end quote. This article goes on and is very well written. I don't have any particular issue with the article itself. It suggests while there's a market for single-player games, it may just not be EA who is investing in them. A similar article from Kotaku, published on October 26th, written by Jason Schreier, goes into much more exacting detail about the trials of Visceral Games and its place within EA. From what I understand, Mr. Schreier does a lot of investigative pieces for Kotaku, so I'll take him at his word for it. It is a lengthy article. It's very detailed, so I had no fault with his article either. Between these two articles, while there's a lot to read and read into, the idea of the future of the single-player games being in trouble is just not one I'm concerned with. There's been articles written by larger publications and commentary from all over the internet by anyone in or around the video game industry talking about that. I mean, just kind of giving their own thoughts on this as to whether or not this is a bad sign for EA or bad sign for gaming in general, or any other number of, there's too many opinions for me to track by myself, I'm afraid. Really, this is not a new idea. Going back to July of 2013, which is nearly 4.5 years ago at this point, Den of Geek published a piece titled "Are Single-Player Video Games in Trouble?", which primarily focused on the criticism of the first Titanfall for not having a single-player campaign. There was a campaign of sorts that tied into the multiplayer, so it kind of gave hints about what the larger Titanfall universe was like, but we didn't. There was nothing where like Titanfall 2, which we have the benefit of hindsight in this case, where ultimately Respawn Entertainment decided to have a single player campaign in Titanfall 2. Which I personally enjoyed. I'm a big Titanfall fan. I loved the chance to explore the whole Titanfall universe a little bit more in depth. So I personally found it to be quite enjoyable. And I guess my real beef here isn't whether or not single player games are going to exist going forward. Will we need AAA style massive game studios to make great single player games? Simply no. But I don't think it's fair to call the AAA single player industry dead either. I mean, perhaps for EA, the games as a service model is the path they wish to pursue, and that's perfectly fine. I'm a massive fan of Star Wars Galaxy of Heroes. I've put some money into it in the past, and I've played it every single day since the game started. So I don't despise the model as a monetizing idea. I mean, I'm not buying anything for Galaxy of Heroes right now for other issues, but I have in the past, and I think it's a fair idea as a business model, and ultimately it's transactionatory. If you don't want, if you don't want to buy DLC, then don't pay them for it. If it's too much, or if you think it's an unfair advantage to you, or if you just kind of despise the idea in general, just don't pay them for it. That's a whole separate conversation, which can be had another time. But for as a business model, I don't think it's an unfair or illegitimate business model. Going off that, though, I'm sure many have seen the comparison to Guerrilla Games' Horizon Zero Dawn, which is an absolutely stellar example of an in-depth, gorgeous, exciting multiplayer experience. I bought a PlayStation 4 just for this game, though I do want to preface that by saying it was a used console. It was not new. I'm not really a Sony fanboy. I just liked the whole idea of the way the developers set up the marketing, I guess, sold me, really, is what happened. And I have not been disappointed at all. There's also plenty of other examples of great AAA titles as well, like The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, GTA 5, Gears of War 4, I think has an outstanding single-player campaign. Final Fantasy 15 an argument can be made for that. Tales from the Borderlands I personally love a lot. Divinity Original Sin 2 has gotten great reviews across the board. Not every single one of these games, and these are just a few examples, is a Game of the Year award necessarily. I'm not making an argument for that. I'm not even saying that from your point of view they're necessarily great games. All I'm saying is that they're good examples of competent single-player games. Then also, let's not forget about the non-AAA single-player, segment of the gaming industry. I'm not worried about it either, to be honest with you. I've personally come to revel in the single-player narratives of The Uncertain, even though there's only one episode out for it, and it's supposed to be episodic and more to come. The Talos Principle was a fantastic puzzle game, and there was a great narrative in that as well. Soma was wonderful as a first-person psychological horror, and actual horror, not just psychological. There's also a story about my uncle, which I haven't finished, but I've enjoyed it so far of what I've played of it. They all have an interesting, similar narrative of having a shrouded history or an unknown past that really kind of interests me. So I think that's why I'm all invested in those. They have a common theme, so I think that's why I like those in particular. There's also Observer, which has been highly touted in Steam reviews and that I'm looking forward to playing. I haven't had the chance to do it yet. Just too many other things going on lately. And there's also that these indie game studio games are cheap. Talos Principle cost me $15 when it was on sale. The Uncertain was $3, $2.99. It's normally $15. Steam had it on sale for $3. Couldn't say no to it. I think I got the Observer when it was 24 something, some sort of discount that Steam was giving. I think it's normally $30, so I think I saved the $5.5-ish on it. So it's. And I'm confident Observer is going to be a good game. So I'm not, I don't think I'm going to regret that purchase. I haven't regretted Talos Principle or The Uncertain or Soma at all. And these are all inexpensive indie games that were just fantastic, and their Steam reviews reflect it. It's not just me who thinks that. I mean, I genuinely believe that the future of a single-player, highly narrative game is 100% secure. I don't think it's going anywhere anytime soon. Ultimately, if EA doesn't want to play in this sphere, fine. They don't have to. But the single-player component of Battlefront 2 is a consideration here. I wouldn't count EA out of the game, and if you will. wouldn't call EA out of the game completely for the single-player franchises. We may be looking more to Sony and Nintendo for the majority of the single-player experiences going forward. I mean, Microsoft as well to, I think, a lesser degree. But, you know, these are all things that need to be considered. And I think that the single-player arena for gaming is safe, secure. I think it's perfectly fine. So don't be too beat up about it. You know, there's always options out there, especially, you know, I mean, there's a lot of indie games on Xbox One now if you're on the console side of things. I'm sure that's the case for PlayStation as well and Nintendo. I mean, I don't have a Nintendo Switch. I got a 3DS. So there's I don't really play it except for the Pokemon game that I bought years ago, Pokemon Y. And Xenoblade, you know, Xenoblade is another good example of a single player game. You know, I think that we're safe, and I wouldn't panic too much about it. There's always going to be new creators out there with great ideas. So keep all that in mind. And, you know, obviously if you are a PC gamer, Steam is the godsend for us in many respects, where it has so much out there from so many indie developers, and it'll suit your fancy, whatever you're looking for. So I guess with that, that's it. That's all I got. So, you know, thanks for watching. As always, see you around.